Steve, none of these douchebags in the community have ever confronted me and corrected me on anything regarding science.
In August 2016, TrueEmpiricism made a claim that in the electron transport chain that, quote, 4 electrons were taken from the oxygen, unquote. Which would mean that the oxygen is oxidized, since whenever an atom loses electrons, it is known as oxidation, while a gaining of electrons is known as reduction. This is commonly often memorized by the acronym OIL-RIG, to help remember that oxidation is a loss of electrons, while reduction is a gain. It was quickly noted by Rational Mind and Steve McRae that TrueEmpiricism meant to say that 4 electrons were taken by the oxygen, as oxygen isn't typically oxidized, as it is an oxidizer, meaning it can oxidize or remove electrons from another atom, thereby gaining electrons and being reduced. TrueEmpiricism, instead of taking the correction, then decided to make matters worse by claiming that he was talking about oxidative phosphorylation, which he claimed was what happens when, quote, you have cytochrome oxidase take 4 electrons from the oxygen atom to form water, unquote. This is exceptionally wrong on multiple accounts. First being that cytochrome oxidase, known as complex 4, doesn't take the 4 electrons from the oxygen atom but takes them from 4 cytochrome C molecules, and then donates them to the oxygen. In addition, oxidative phosphorylation deals with the transfer of electrons to electron acceptors, like oxygen, to produce the proton, or hydrogen ion gradient, and is a combination of the electron transport chain and chemiosmosis, which is the process of ATP production which occurs in complex 5 of the electron transport chain. It does not change the fact that electrons are being donated to the oxygen, not taken from the oxygen as TrueEmpiricism had claimed. But what does all this technical mumbo-jumbo really mean? What is TrueEmpiricism trying to explain? Once again, no one really knows, as he is a mixture of jargon bombing and word salad, which is nearly impossible to understand. As he himself has absolutely no clue to what he is even referring to. So let's break this down and explain what is called electron transport chain, and how it relates to ATP synthesis. Electron transport chain, or ETC, is part of cellular respiration, where electrons are moved across the inner mitochondrial membrane, not the inner mitochondrial matrix as TrueEmpiricism consistently says. The inner mitochondrial membrane being the membrane that separates the mitochondrial matrix from the intermembrane space. Along the inner mitochondrial membrane are 5 transmembrane proteins called integral membrane proteins, known also as protein complexes. Their function is to transport electrons through the membrane, while producing a proton, or hydrogen ion gradient, which is a differential of the number of hydrogen ions on one side of the membrane, as compared to the other side. This differential will be the motive force for the last complex in the chain, complex 5. Referred commonly to as ATP synthase, where the ATP energy molecule is produced. ATP is a ribonucleotide, which is a nucleotide that consists of 3 parts, a ribose sugar, a base, and a phosphate group, contrary to a DNA nucleotide which contains a deoxyribose sugar. The difference being that the ribose sugar has an oxygen atom attached to a hydrogen atom on the 2' part of the carbon ring. The simple nucleotide, adenosine monophosphate, or AMP, consists of a ribose sugar, a single phosphate group, and the nuclear base adenine. If there are 2 phosphate groups linked by phosphoanhydride bonds, it is known as adenosine diphosphate, or ADP. and if there are 3 phosphate groups, it is called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, which is the energy molecule produced by cellular respiration. Protein complex 4, which is an enzyme called cytochrome C oxidase, is where electrons are moved to molecular oxygen from the heme protein cytochrome C through a series of transfers using heme centers, cytochrome A and A3, along with protein-bound copper, eventually producing 2 water molecules as a waste product. This process removes 8 hydrogen ions from the mitochondrial matrix, 4 going to produce water, and 4 translocated to the intermembrane space to add to the hydrogen ion gradient. Before moving on to complex 5, or ATP synthase, let's pause for a moment to quickly compare this to TrueEmpiricism's explanation of the electron transport chain.
So you said in your video, there are 4 electrons taken from the oxygen, which means it is oxidized. That's not what I said in the video. If you go back to the last video that I put up, you hear me talking about how oxidative phosphorylation, when I'm talking about oxidative phosphorylation and cytochrome BC1, and cytochrome oxidase, and the different complex structures along the mitochondrial matrix.
Instead of babbling incoherently, TrueEmpiricism could have just said that oxidative phosphorylation is the process that takes place by the electron transport chain, which produces the hydrogen ion gradient, combined with chemiosmosis, which is where that gradient is used to produce ATP. The protein complexes are also not along the mitochondrial matrix, but are a type of integral membrane protein, called a transmembrane protein, meaning that it spans across the entire width of the phospholipid bilayer membrane, and are embedded in the inner mitochondrial membrane, not the mitochondrial matrix as TrueEmpiricism had claimed.
That it's cytochrome BC, or cytochrome oxidase, that is supposed to be catalyzing it. It doesn't have anything to do with the what is it? The oxygen atom. It has to do with cytochrome oxidase catalyzing it. So what he just did right now, when I was speaking with him, he doubled down. He gave me a statement that was supposed to demonstrate that I was wrong about electron transport chain and oxidative phosphorylation. But the problem was the comment that he said, that he gave me, should have allowed him to understand that the electrons that are coming from the atom,
cytochrome C oxidase, or complex 4, is an enzyme that helps take electrons from a cytochrome molecule and transfer them to an oxygen atom. TrueEmpiricism was wrong, as he said that electrons were taken from the oxygen atom, not given to the oxygen, which would mean that the oxygen was oxidized rather than reduced.
This is kind of technical, but I want you guys to try to follow what I'm saying. This is really, really important right here, because the mistake that he made is not a matter of opinion. This isn't like a debate thing. This is like a general science fact that he's clearly showed that he didn't understand. We're not talking about the oxidation of oxygen right now, as Hogtie put it in the comments underneath his hangout that he had running. We're talking about cytochrome, the oxidase, the cytochrome oxidase, right? This structure along the mitochondrial matrix, where you have 4 electrons that are going through, because with an electron transport chain, you have a reduction of electrons basically going on through the electron transport chain, and you'll have 4 electrons that are carried over and added to the oxygen atom, and then you'll have it form water. That's basically what ends up happening right there.
What actually happens is that the 4 electrons get donated through a series of reduction reactions to molecular oxygen, but here at least, TrueEmpiricism realizes that the electrons are transferred to the oxygen to reduce it, to allow it to combine with hydrogen to form water. Which of course is what Rational Mind and Steve McRae had been trying to tell him from the beginning. But I think that is enough for now. As true empiricism eventually got it right, although he still never acknowledged that everyone else trying to tell him why he was wrong were correct, and he in fact had gotten something very basic, so very, very wrong. We will continue the explanation of what really happens in ATP synthase later in part 2, and once again compare it to true empiricism's claims. Thank you for watching.
Taurus, he's had to correct him on certain things. I've had to correct this guy numerous times. I mean, I really have had to correct this guy several different times.